For further analysis on those market moves, I'm joined by Jacques Pretorius from Sinayo Securities. Jacques, good afternoon. Thank you for being with us today.
Good day. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Jacques, I mean, big week, for central banks. We are expecting a US Fed decision tomorrow and an ECB one this week as well. We can also see, the JSE in red screens. I'm wondering if there's a correlation between this expectation and what we're seeing on the local market today.
I think partly. I think what happened was the US obviously last night in late session started coming off. I think that was partly due to the deflator figures coming out, inflation deflator figures coming out in the US, and at a slower pace than expected. The deflation is slower than was anticipated, and perhaps the sell-off in the US and the follow-through today in our markets. And yes, I guess the market is quite cautious ahead of the rate increases and decisions on that. We believe there will be another 25 basis point rate hike in the US, and this is possibly the last one for a while. And then obviously in the Eurozone as well, we'll see some rate increases there. Not quite sure, right, if it's going to be 25 to 50 basis points. I think the market is on the side of a 50 basis point rate hike at this point.
Very interesting, to see how that one is going to play itself out, especially in the US. And the reason for this is because of what we're seeing now with First Republic Bank and JP Morgan Chase coming in to, rescue this one. I'm wondering, Jacques, is this enough of an indicator for the US Fed, besides what we're seeing with the inflation picture, that too much is falling apart at the hands of these high interest rates?
I think it's definitely partly so. They're obviously on their side doing everything right. They can stem the fear and contagion in that bank sector. And this is the second largest bank that's now gone under, really, in effect. JP Morgan coming in, buying the assets, paying 10.6 billion for it. Yes, the big banks in America are getting bigger. You start worrying that they are becoming too big to fail. So they will be supported, I guess, by the US government. And they obviously wouldn't want to see that. But obviously in the short term, it contains the contagion, if you want to call it that way. And they're trying very hard to maintain the confidence in their market and in the banking sector. So yes, I think we're in this lackluster phase in the market. No clear direction, a lot of uncertainty, and there's a lot of things that needs to play out, right, before we can see this market go stronger in perhaps the second part of the year or next year.
It's very interesting. Also, data coming out this week. We've seen China PMI coming in a little bit more depressed than expected. The same with Europe. Still here in South Africa, manufacturing depressed. What we are seeing here, is some sort of a contraction in the sector. Jacques, is this an indicator of this much anticipated global recession that we've been speaking about for the last few months?
Possibly, it's slowly but surely these interest rates are having that effect. I think the US, if we look at their possible recession, will only come at year end perhaps and into early next year. We might already be there, so we are under pressure. I think the expectations for us were slightly lower at 48. So we came in actually slightly better than expectations, but still we are in this phase of lower growth. And there's no catalyst, right, to improve on that at the moment. We need, right, the power situation to be sorted out. I think that's the biggest drag on the economy. And there's no short-term solution yet. Yes, so I think this drags on for a while longer.
And then, Jacques, keen to hear your thoughts on, investors and where they should be putting their money right now. We do have an equities market in South Africa, at least, that is very cheap, but growth is very low. And I've heard some analysts say it's actually best right now to go and hide in bonds. And even some saying it's best to go hide in gold. I'm wondering, from your perspective, is this a good time for equities, a good time maybe to come in and buy the dips that we may see, especially here at home?
Okay, right. So we are quite cheap, right, from a forward P multiple perspective or from a price earnings ratio perspective. Funny enough, if you look at the dividends that are being paid out by companies, it's in a ratio to the P ratio, it's actually quite low. So it either says one or two things. Either the companies are very cautious and they want to hold on to their cash in the short term, or they actually simply don't have the cash flow to pay out the dividends. So perhaps, yes, on a PE basis, we're very cheap, but perhaps on a dividend yield basis, not as cheap, right, as we would have liked. Obviously in our banking sector, for instance, we've taken the heat of contagion from the US market on their bank sector. So our banks have fallen back as well. But don't think our banks are completely in the same situation. Yes, there could be some debt issues, right? Repayment of debt issues going further down the line. But I don't think it's going to affect our banks from a earnings perspective to a large extent. And I think our banking sector was only cheap in the last 15, 20 years twice, and that was in the crash of 2008 and in the COVID crisis. So our banks look very, very cheap at this point. It's a place I think that one can hide. Cheap valuation levels with still some growth going forward.
And then before I let you go, Jacques, must ask you what your stock pick is for the week and why you've opted for this specific counter.
Okay, so I've sort of motivated in some way already.
Yeah.
Standard Bank I like. It still hasn't recovered from the start of, let's call it the end of February. Yes, I think these things are at their support basis right now, cheap, offering value going forward.
Well, Jacques,
Standard Bank's the pick.
Standard Bank's the pick. Thank you so much for being with us today, Jacques, and helping us paint the picture for the week ahead. Have a fantastic one further. And that was your Midday Markets Update with Sinayo's Jacques Pretorius.